Great panel, fantastic moderation, Lisha, and phenomenal participants, Justin, Jennifer, Sarah, and Sharon, David. Pleasure to be having you here with us at the Webit Global Impact Week. A kind reminder that you can use our platform to share, ask questions, state opinions, create connections, celebrate such during the 5 days of Global Webit Impact Week, #Webit, and the world's biggest ever Webit event with over 100,000 people registered. Our next panel is focusing on urban and green mobility and the strength to sustainable environment. We have our moderator and friend, Jim Motavalli from Barron's to joining us again. Jim, the floor is yours.
Welcome to our panel. We're going to be talking about urban mobility, which I think is a very, very hot topic now as the world pivots towards electrifying the global transportation fleet. We're doing a lot of talking about how that may play out in cities where charging cars can be a challenge, and also the issue of last mile delivery, which is being addressed with electrical solutions all around the world. We have a very, very knowledgeable panel on this topic, and the four speakers are Brad Bow, who's the co-founder and executive chairman at Lime, Silvia Fischer, who's the vice president for smart mobility at Free Now in Europe, Roger Hunter, vice president electric mobility at Shell Renewables and Energy Solutions, and Karen Vancluysen, who's secretary general of POLIS, also in Europe. So why don't we just go around the panel very briefly and have you each talk about what it is you do and how it impacts on this issue of global mobility and urban mobility specifically, starting with you, Karen.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me. So I'm Karen Vancluysen from POLIS, and that's a European network of cities and regions working together on sustainable urban mobility and innovation. So that's our focus.
Great. Silvia?
Hello, everyone. Thanks for having me too. It's a pleasure. So I'm representing Free Now here. Free Now is on the move to becoming the European's leading multi-service mobility platform. That means our origins have been in ride-hailing. Now we're really multi-service, a mass platform including all forms of urban mobility in the major European spots. And yeah, really bothered by the question how urban mobility has to look in the future.
Roger Hunter from Shell.
Hey, Jim. Yeah, I'm Roger Hunter. So I look after the EV charging solutions business in Shell. It's a global business spanning 20 countries, and we're selling EV charging hardware and software and helping it easier for motorists and also businesses to decarbonize with EV charging solutions. And yeah, great to be here.
And finally, no, I think we got everybody there. Oh, I'm sorry, I missed Brad Bow. From
no worries. Hi, everyone. I'm Brad. I'm the co-founder and chairman of Lime. We operate smart micro-mobility fleet across the globe in over 30 countries. What we provide is not just cost-effective and faster solution for getting around the urban environment, but also it consumes much less energy and it's all electric powered. Hopefully will help to change the landscape of urban mobility.
Why don't we start with you, Roger? I want to ask you, we had British Petroleum change its name to Beyond Petroleum. And we saw early moves by oil companies to get involved in electric mobility. Yeah. And it seems to me that it's actually happening now. Shell is very much involved in EV charging and the electric solution. So maybe, how are you applying that to urban situations?
Yeah, you're right, Jim. It's really big for us at Shell. We've invested heavily. We continue to invest heavily, and it's becoming more and more core for us, which is really encouraging. I feel kind of really well supported and well funded by the senior executives here at Shell. I mean, for us, really, it's about a customer back approach. So for urban, specifically urban areas, we're looking at the customer touch points both for consumers, so how do they charge at home? How do they charge at destination, like a supermarket? Maybe if you don't have a driveway, how do you charge on street? But also, how do you charge at one of our gas stations, as we're putting in more fast chargers there. So all those touch points for consumers, it's really important. And we're investing heavily in all those points that I mentioned. So we have businesses in all of them, such that we can provide that all-encompassing customer experience for consumers. But it's more than that as well. It's about businesses. It's about fleets. It's about fleets that have depots. How do we provide charging solutions in the depot and link that to renewable energy like solar panels and behind the meter solutions? So we're providing real life examples of that today. And then combined with how do fleets charge outside of the depot when they're on the move, on the go, on the highway. And we're putting in a lot of fast chargers and have a great growth program in that. So it's pretty intense and encompassing, and it's global as well. It's across more and more countries as we continue to invest in this space. So yeah, cities, urban areas, really important, but also when people move between cities as well.
Well, as Roger says, charging if you don't have a driveway can be a challenge. That's particularly true of city dwellers. One way of getting around that is with public fleets of vehicles that people can use when they need them. And that's why organizations like Freeform or Free Now exist. So Silvia, tell us about how this works in Europe, because it seems urban mobility is pretty different in Europe and the US.
Indeed. In Europe, I think you see various trends. Yeah, you see a multitude of shared fleets arising. I mean, same as in the US, I guess. Brad being here for Lime, it's one example. We see the kick scooters, we see mopeds, electronic mopeds, we see car sharing, we see bikes as commuter schemes. Next to that, we have a very strong public transit system. So that means while our cities are super crowded with private cars, which is the actual problem, we see a lot of alternatives arising. And what we need actually are creative solutions. And what we do at Free Now is provide access to all this urban mobility landscape via just one app. We deeply integrate all these fleets, and our customers can, with one single click, one single account generation, book all the available fleets with very quick, easy access, so that they can serve their mobility needs as they want to go.
In the US, we have a long way to go to make our different forms of transportation sort of interoperative. And there are some cities like Portland, Oregon is a good example, where you can go from, you can take a train from the airport to connect to the light rail system and the bus system, but a lot of American cities aren't like that. Let me ask Karen, you're planning to make Europe more interoperative in this way, and that's what your planning agency focuses on. How successful do you think you've been at that?
Well, we really, if we want to compete with a private car, which still in Europe is way too attractive to way too many people, apparently, if we really want to compete, as Silvia said, we have to offer a wide range of alternatives that are ideally integrated. So multimodality needs to become the new way of moving around. But in order for that to happen, we have to make it easy and attractive for people, because it's still way easier to be monomodal, clearly, even if that's not sustainable. And while Silvia was talking about digital integration and bringing these different modes together in an ecosystem, only that makes sense if we also have physical integration on the ground. So we also need to invest in the right infrastructure that makes it easy to combine these different modes of transport through interchanges, stations where the different modes come together and can be seamlessly combined, but also more and more through neighborhood-based mobility hubs. So on a smaller scale, at a shorter distance, where the different shared mobility modes are being combined. So that digital integration coming together in mobility as a service, as we call it here in Europe, needs to be complemented, or needs to have the other side of the coin, which is physical integration. And that's what our cities are investing in a lot. And the good thing is that they are in charge of urban space, so they can also really decide which modes they want to prioritize through urban space allocation.
Karen, if you were to look at Europe as a whole on a scale of 1 to 100, how far do you think you've gotten in making the European continent interoperative this way? Is it like 50%, 60?
Well, there has been a quite long tradition of working towards multimodality, and the backbone, just to be clear, for us of an urban mobility ecosystem is mass transit complemented with active travel. And then to fill the gaps, we need those shared mobility options. And we're not as far as in terms of reality when you compare it to how much we talk about it. Mass, for example, it's talked about a lot, but the level of deployment remains relatively limited. And this also has to do with the fact that there are a number of barriers to be overcome. Bringing different types of stakeholders together, public and private, finding the business case, creating trust when it comes to sharing data between different types of stakeholders that are sometimes competing, getting rid of the walled gardens. So there are still quite a lot of hurdles to be taken. And so I wouldn't put a number on it, but we still have a long way to go. At the same time, we have no choice. We need to prioritize sustainable modes if we want to address the societal challenges we face.
I don't know why, but I'm hearing the number 50% from you. Even though you didn't say it. Brad, let's turn to you. Certainly the Lime scooters are now ubiquitous, and in the US we have major intermodality issues getting around. Scooters are one solution to that, and we're seeing them in American cities, but you also have global ambitions. To talk about that.
Yeah, sure. I think the one of the biggest vision for Lime is not a market share or how many cities we're in, but really is to provide a solution to the users to connect to the massive transit or that to solve the last mile transportation issue, but and also generate the movement and generates as much discussions and attention to the urban mobility, to the pollution challenge that we have. So we do have a footprint, I would say half in Europe and half in the US, probably a little bit more so in Europe in terms of our footprint. Again, that I think the, as Karen and also Silvia said, and also Roger mentioned as well, it's not going to be a silver bullet can solve the problem. It's a collective of efforts and solutions come together to change this all. And I think US and Europe and the rest of the world are also connected in that way.
Do people use, I know they do, but they use scooters or bikes, shared bikes, to do the last mile in their commute, right? From, say, a transit stop to their office. Is that a lot of the usage you see?
Yeah, it's a very significant portion of the usage. I think what we provide in terms of replacing the pollutive car traffic are mainly in two. One is the short distance, too long to walk, but too short to drive. Roughly a range from half mile to 2 mile, for the short trips, they don't have to take a car. And the second biggest usage is to connect to the massive transit, which historically has been kind of like blocking people from adopting it. Now we provide a solution for them to easily connect to the massive transit.
COVID has brought us many ups and downs, and I was wondering that there's been sort of a setback for public transit because of COVID. People have been afraid to use it. Did you actually see a spike in usage because of that?
We do see a lot of shift and also sort of like, I won't call it a spike, but there is some of the user behavior shift and also the change of behaviors. At the beginning of the COVID, we started providing to essential workers, healthcare providers for free, and also first responders. And then gradually, when the society opens up a little bit more, we do feel and also see the data shows there are people shifting away from the public transit for the obvious reasons. We're glad that we're providing the service when they need to get around, but meanwhile, I do believe that we will go back to normal, and public transit will, maybe take a little bit of time, but it will peak again.
Interesting. Silvia, I believe you've recently put something like 100,000 vehicles on the road. Are those mostly cars, or you use other forms also?
Yeah, I mean, as said, it's a multi-service platform. So currently we are above 130,000 non-car vehicles because, I mean, of course, by origins, we provide access as a platform also to ride-hailing services. So we have like 60,000 taxi and PHV vehicles operated via the platform, plus 130 e-vehicles. The majority of them indeed kick scooters. Yeah? So at the moment, we look at probably 80% of the fleet kick scooters. Then we have really a large car sharing fleet. We have bikes and electric mopeds in several cities in Europe.
Yeah, we're starting to see the kick scooters here too. They're starting to come on the U.S. market. Roger, looking at Shell's business model, is electrification going to take a larger part of the company going forward? I mean, do you see the end of internal combustion ahead of us? I mean, we have a lot of automakers are saying this is our last internal combustion engine platform. From now on, we're electrification. So I would think this has got to reorient Shell, and initiatives like yours will be a bigger part of the company. Is that right?
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. I mean, we're seeing a real transition. And, there's still going to be a lot of need for fossil fuels as we go forward, but there's going to be a greater need for electricity as well as we go forward. Electrifying transport, making transport cleaner as well as smarter, improving air in cities, helping customers decarbonize. These are all key themes for us at Shell. We are growing our clean electricity business. I sit in the renewables and energy solutions business. So providing EV charging solutions is part of an energy solution. It has to come with 100% renewable electricity. It helps local air. This is indeed a growing part of the business, and we're actually able to use the core business, the legacy business in mobility. We're one of the biggest players at the moment in terms of putting energy into transport. Whether it's light duty transport or whether it's ships or planes. And we've got decarbonisation solutions that are growing for all of those areas. It won't always be clean electricity. In some places, it'll be hydrogen. In other places, it'll be biofuels. But the key is we are building more cleaner energy solutions to decarbonise and clean up transport.
Well, I think the largest part of most people's carbon footprint is their flight time. And we're seeing a lot of novel approaches to that in terms of electric taxis. There could actually be autonomous that would be delivering people around. And a number of companies have got heavily involved in that, including automakers. And we're also seeing hydrogen solutions for air travel. There's a lot of different things being floated. Electric airliners, I don't think is going to happen. That's going to be a legacy type of property for a while. Karen, I wanted to ask you, is Norway an example of where Europe is going? Because I believe Norway, which has very good subsidies for electric vehicles and is using them as taxis, Tesla is a huge seller there. Is that a model for Europe for the future?
Well, Norway has definitely been leading the way when it comes to the rollout of electrification in Europe. But what we want to make clear when we talk about the urban context in particular is that electrification is one of several solutions. And it's definitely not a purpose of local authorities to see the current car fleet replaced by electric cars, because that's not going to solve congestion problems. And that's also one of the major issues that need to be tackled in the urban environment. So if you look at the core objective of an urban mobility policy right now, it's modal shift away from the private car. And those cars that will remain, because there will always be cars, but those need to be electrified. But first of all, the number one priority is to have fewer cars. And indeed, to make sure that those are being electrified, we see cities introducing a number of measures, such as low emission zones, moving on to ultra low emission zones, and ending up with zero emission zones in the timeframe 2030, 2035. But also other types of urban vehicle access regulations, which discourage car use in cities, such as congestion charges and other types of pricing measures. So in addition, we see that many of our cities are investing in providing the necessary charging infrastructure. As was mentioned earlier, this is of course instrumental in overcoming the chicken and egg problem with electric cars, but also to finally reach that critical mass. So many cities are taking up that responsibility as well. So there is something happening, and all the cities in Europe that are leading the way are pushing for electrification. But just to be clear, that's only one part of a very complicated and multifaceted solution.
It's actually very good, Karen, to remind me occasionally that the solution isn't always cars. As an auto writer, that can probably be my default position. But let me go to Brad on this question, because do you see your company as being part of taking people out of cars? And do you agree that it's not the best solution ultimately because it doesn't address congestion?
Yes, I think one of the key things is we do have the vision of like taking people out of cars, but not necessarily just cars. I think car plays a significant role in our economy and life. It just there are 80% in an urban situation, they don't need a car, right? They are fall back on the car ride because there's no other choices. You go out for like to the post office with 2 letters. There's no reason you have to drive a car, but today I think solutions are limited and people fall back on driving a car. And the second part is, in terms of like not just the car, it's the energy consumption. To travel 1 mile, we're talking about 4,000 pounds of steel and plastic to take 150-pound person for a mile, versus like the energy consumption on alternative is 100th, if not less, in terms of using a scooter or bike. So those are the 2 things address the energy consumption, pollution, as well as the real estate that we shared in urban settings.
It's interesting. We are seeing in the United States, and I think we're catching up with the rest of the world. Initially, China was the first country to really embrace the electric bike. Then I think it spread to Europe, and now it's catching on heavily in the United States. Do you see a big future for e-bikes?
Yes, we definitely see a big future in terms of the e-bikes, but I think we are not going to limit it. Also, our vision and also value proposition is to provide whatever the user feel more comfortable, feel safe, feel convenient to use. So we have the bikes, the scooters, the e-bikes, and we're also testing electric mopeds as well for different needs. Again, the goal is the same: reduce energy consumption, reduce pollution, reduce physical real estate required for the urban transportation, and provide the best solution for the users.
I want to talk a little bit about urban delivery, because it's an important contributor to congestion. New York has something like 1 million trucks going in and out of it every day. I mean, it's insane the amount of commercial traffic that goes through there. So there's some last mile solutions that I think are very innovative. And Silvia, are you seeing that in Europe? I mean, I've been to conferences in Europe where they talked about using bicycles, but what we're seeing now is a lot of small electric transit vehicles being deployed, which certainly cut down on pollution. Maybe they don't do much for congestion, but we're seeing that. Has that been adopted heavily in Europe? Certainly, since in Europe you have areas where you cannot actually bring congestion vehicles in inner cities. Are you seeing electric transit being adopted there?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, we clearly see a trend towards more sustainable modes, in particular also looking at delivery and food delivery. A lot of startups trying out different forms of delivery with these food boxes in the back of it. We also see, and that's something that Brad has mentioned, and a lot of players in the industry have done, that when COVID arose, there was a lot of creativity around using assets that we see on the street in Europe being provided to the health system, to food delivery, etc. So I think the future will turn out how really urban mobility, urban life will be shaped. And we're all part in that game and really excited about this quite moving creative industry.
Karen, I've even seen the idea of using drones for last mile delivery. Certainly it would solve congestion problems. I'm not sure we're technically there with drones, but have you seen that solution too?
Well, drones are being discussed also in Europe, but in terms of actual deployment for deliveries, it's still quite limited. There are specific use cases, but as a general option, the logistics sector tends to be very skeptical also in terms of energy consumption. We do work a lot though with the logistics sector and the cities to see how we can move towards carbon neutral city logistics by 2030, which is a European ambition. And with the explosion of e-commerce, even more during the pandemic, we really need to mitigate the adverse impacts of urban freight. That's clear. And we work towards consolidation and bundling of goods, for example, for the last urban mile of freight deliveries, but also cargo bikes are really picking up as a popular mode for that last urban mile for smaller delivery. So yeah, it's a very high priority topic, but I wouldn't say that drones are a super priority within that context just yet. I mean,
no, not yet. No, we have the issue in the US of our cities and our entire country being much more spread out than Europe, and it presents a challenge for public transit that we're starting to address. And certainly some of the infrastructure bill does include a whole lot of money for passenger rail and railroads. And traditionally, we've sort of starved our railroads in the United States. So that's very good to see. Roger, I wanted to ask you, Shell is obviously going through changes. Where do you think the company will be in, say, 2050? Well, what will be your core businesses?
It's a great question. Well, I mean, we're certainly going to be a much lower carbon company, and we've pledged to be net zero by 2050. And we've got some, clear actions in play in the shorter, medium term as well, and ambitions there that we've gone to the market and told. So there's a very clear direction in terms of being lower carbon, and with that means developing more of a clean electricity business. That's one of the key elements that you'd see in 2050. An integrated electricity business that goes from renewables into electricity trading and then across to providing electricity and cleaner solutions to customers of all different types. I think the biofuels business will be much bigger than it is today. Biofuels for aviation. I think hydrogen will be a huge theme. It already is in Shell. We've been talking and working in hydrogen for well over the last 25 years. Since I've been at the company, hydrogen has been a theme for us. So, I think those are going to be key elements in terms of our lower carbon solutions. I think for other parts, we will still see fossil production in gas and in other areas where it's harder to really decarbonize. We will be looking at things like sequestering carbon in the ground, and we'll be looking at nature-based solutions as well as a whole suite of solutions that when you bring it together, you get to a significantly lower carbon energy company. As I say, net zero by 2050. So that's where we're heading at Shell. And really that's where we want the industry to go as well. It's important for the planet, it's important for our future. So there's a real buzz about that across Shell right now.
It's amazing. You're seeing just about every company in the world set a date for being carbon neutral. And I was just talking to the people at Polestar, and they want to have a carbon neutral car by 2030. Brad, going to you, do you think that we're seriously on this path now, irreversibly? And do you think we can get to a 100% renewable energy economy? We're seeing like the state of California is set to actually ban the sale of internal combustion cars. It's a huge development. How do you see all this happening? Or do you think that companies will succeed in being carbon neutral like they project?
Yes, I firmly believe so. And I think it will be essential for us to achieve that goal. And many cases, like the big movement like this, started with the discussions and also people's attention. And then every stakeholder got involved and set the goals together one by one. just like what Roger said, right? Historically, even 10 years ago, that was unthinkable, but now we're seeing the actions, movements, and commitments from all different parties, including the government and private parties, and also just consumer are demanding it, given the awareness and also their enthusiasm, attitude towards it. And for us, that we already are 100% renewable energy in terms of recharging our fleet. And we're committed in the next year or so is 100% of operation in addition to the vehicle charge. We also committed as a company will be not only the carbon emission net zero, but also waste zero, way ahead of the global goals that we set as a company. That's why we're here. That's what we live by.
You're saying that Lime is 100% net zero emissions in terms of recharging.
That's correct. We
Wow.
already achieved it last year.
What goals do you have left?
We have two more goals. We have one goal is not only the recharging, but there's also the entire operation, meaning the power the warehouses, even our office electric, consumption. We want to make that 100% carbon neutral as well. And the second goal is the 100% zero waste, meaning not just the operation of vehicle recharging, but also the production process, the entire process end to end.
Karen, the last time I checked, there were something like 130 cities in Europe that had banned cars from their urban centers. And since then, you've had country after country in Europe saying they're going to ban the sale of internal combustion cars. This is a big change. Do you see these mandates actually taking place, and you see the preparation for it in Europe?
Yeah, so when we talk about cities in particular, we see that there are increasing ambitions when it comes to climate neutrality, as we call it, which is not just transport, it's the whole, all kinds of different sectors, whether we're talking about buildings, whether we're talking about transport or other types of energy. And we have a mission, as it's called now, that has been launched by the European Commission to have 100 climate neutral cities by 2030. And the level of interest coming from the cities is tremendous. So within the time frame of, let's say, 2030 for the leading cities and 2050 for the larger group of followers, we really see that there will be a drastic and radical move towards climate neutrality. When it comes to transport in particular, we see an increasing introduction of urban vehicle access regulations, as I mentioned before, ranging from low emission zones up to zero emission zones within the next 10 years. So this is really happening. And what is really helpful through the network that we represent is that cities also see that they're not alone, that they see other political leaders taking similar decisions, that they can also inform their citizens that they're not crazy, that there is a whole movement of political leaders in Europe taking action and taking radical decisions that are not necessarily popular from day one with all citizens, but will be needed for the greater good, let's say, and to keep our cities livable.
I think I just saw a news flash where President Biden says he wants to get the United States to carbon neutrality by 2050, if I read that correctly. So it's definitely happening globally. Sylvia, these regulations in Europe are tough and they're happening fairly quickly. How has that affected your fleet in terms of your fleet being all electric? I mean, what's the status of it now in terms of cars with plugs and vehicles with plugs and your company's emissions?
Yeah, I mean,
for FreeNow.
At FreeNow, we're fully committed to becoming climate neutral. Actually, we are, because currently we're already offsetting. We know offsetting is not the way to go, but we've committed that by 2030, we will definitely be 100% carbon neutral, net neutral. By 2025, we want to have achieved 50% of that. And now you have to look differentiated at our business. We have the new mobility part, the 130 vehicles I mentioned. So obviously they are all electric, and that's a deal that we discuss with our providers and to what extent they use also green energy for charging, etc. But our really firm commitment on where we can make a big impact is on the ride-hailing fleet, where we are platform providing the assets of independent drivers, taxi drivers, private hire drivers as well. And there we've already started to put a lot of incentives, and we've managed already this year to increase our fleet by 71% in terms of BEV, battery electric vehicles. And that's a trend that we're really working on. In some markets like Spain, for example, we have more than tripled our fleet last year. We've by far seen that our customers do demand that. Yeah, they're really keen. We did a survey in 10 countries. Our customers tell us that over half of them, the vast majority, is super keen to have default electric vehicles on the platform, that they see a sustainable benefit there, that they really would also be willing to even pay more for that. And we really see ourselves fully committed to support the green mobility on our platform.
I had read that the Tesla Model 3 is actually the best-selling car in Europe, which is pretty remarkable statement right there about where the continent is going. Roger, we touched on Shell's work in EV charging, but I wanted you to elaborate on that. Exactly what is the goal? What is your goal there, and what are you doing currently?
So the goal is to be the largest EV solutions provider in the world by 2030. We're investing heavily in a variety of different areas across all the different touch points. I mean, it kind of boils down to two business models. One is providing the charge post and providing a charge post that works and making sure it's installed in your home or in your depot or in your business. You know, people want to have these things such that they can then run their fleets or run their private car, and we provide that solution. And we're growing across many different countries. That's business model number one. Business model number two is actually providing the public infrastructure such that we can put clean, 100% renewable electricity. We can sell that to motorists and to businesses and fleets who are on the move. So it's really this mixture of these two solutions that enables us, if we couple that with more clean electricity. I mentioned the growth of that business in Shell earlier. You know, you join these bits together, and then you've got a really compelling customer solution, whether you're a consumer, an EV driver, or whether you're a business. So that's where we're heading. We're using the real scale of Shell, the funding of Shell, the experience of Shell, the global presence of Shell. We've got a brand, it's Shell Recharge. It's got a lot of excitement from the team as we take some of our acquisitions in this space and we rebrand them, and we give them financial help, and we're really kind of nurturing these pieces, almost like pieces of a jigsaw that we're putting together in order to really provide low carbon solutions in mobility for customers.
So you're actually using the Shell brand. You're not like a provider to other companies. You're actually branding this as a Shell product.
Yeah, what we're able to do is for businesses, we provide almost like kind of powered by Shell, Shell Recharge, powered by Shell Recharge solutions. So if others want to put their brand on things, and we get many destinations, you imagine like a hotel chain, for instance, they want they want their brand on these things. They want their brand on the app, and well, we provide the back end for all that. We provide the software. We provide essentially a white label solution, and it's like powered by Shell Recharge solutions. So we do that, and we also have a very branded, present public charging network, which is why I say we've got these kind of two business models working in parallel, which allows us to really address the whole of market.
Certainly, we've been seeing one of the things that's caused some reluctance on the part of EV buyers is what they call range anxiety. People worry that they're not going to get to their destination, and a public charging network actually gives them a lot of assurance. But we have got to the point where the range of electric vehicles is rapidly increasing. So we have like the new Lucid Air has 570 miles of range. I can't imagine you'd have range anxiety with that. It's more than most gas cars, but it's something people really do want. And I think Tesla has shown that by providing a public charging network for its own brand, that was very far-sighted of them, because it's proved to be quite an advantage for the brand. Brad, if we were to look forward, I don't know, maybe to 2030, what would you say what would be your product mix in terms of what you are offering to customers on the road?
Yeah, I think the honest answer is we don't know yet. We're keep on innovating and keep on experimenting for the need of the users and also the city as well. Today, I think in the next 10 years, two things I would imagine will be significant change and shifted. First is the user behavior, how they adopt the micromobility and urban transportation in general, how the massive transit and the connected vehicles or shared fleets will be coming all together. And then the other part that we've seen big movements and improvements is city infrastructure. And that's a part of what significantly shape how the urban mobility will be looking like. For example, in the US, bike lane is like very limited in most of the city, and in Europe it's way better, and still they're adding a lot more. If we look at just purely from sheer number of miles of protected bike lanes being added, well, let's just say not only the bike lane, but light vehicle lanes, is significantly accelerated in both Europe and the US. So in the next 10 years, I think infrastructure will change significantly, user behavior will change significantly. And for us, we still will be concentrating, likely will be on the lightweight vehicles, meaning the scooters will stay, the bikes will stay, e-bikes, and lightweight mopeds. But meanwhile, we're also thinking of how we can further integrate it into the rest of the system and how we potentially add more innovative vehicles to it. For example, like covered, for example, that's one scenario for the user. They're demanding yet when it rains or snows, they don't want to be exposed to the elements. And those are the things we'll be keep on innovating. But I think the vision and the mission of the company will not change.
The issue of bike lanes, I think, is very important, and including in cities where there are a lot of bike and scooter accidents. And this morning I was out on my e-bike and somebody in a large SUV got right behind me and honked their horn. And I'm wondering how I'm supposed to react to that, whether I'm supposed to evaporate or what. But I was amazed.
Change too. Yeah.
I was amazed when I went to Sweden and I saw how well developed the bike lane system is there, with even traffic lights and set up to get people to work by bike. And we are so far from that. I mean, some of our cities now we have bike lanes, but it's moving way slower than it needs to be. We have like 4 minutes left. I just want to maybe go quickly around the room and ask our participants where they see themselves. You in particular, what do you think you'll be working on 10 years from now, or how will the issues have changed? Karen, if I was talking to you.
Well, I think I will very much still be talking about the same things as today to some extent, but I hope at least by 2030, we will be in a situation where our cities have become truly multimodal and intermodal, and where the sustainable options have become the obvious choice. What we really also are working on is to help our political leaders introduce radical measures such as pricing measures, for example, which are not popular, but the internalization of external costs brought to society by polluting traffic is something that is long overdue. And it's only when you will touch people in their wallet that they will seriously start to consider the alternatives. And I hope that by 2030, we will be there and the alternatives will be the number one choice and no longer the private car. And if that happens, then I will consider my next 10 years to be successful.
Sylvia, do you think that 10 years hence we'll see a lot lower level of car ownership than we do now around the world, or in Europe and the US?
I do think that we will see a little bit of less car ownership where we already have good car ownership levels today. We cannot forget how many emerging countries there are where they didn't even just start putting cars. But I think, yes, in the developed countries, people will understand that mobility in urban cities has alternatives. They will understand that there are good platforms which give access to a wide range of mobility solutions, that they're right at hand, that they can be flexibly used. We will also see a lot of new form factors. You can see pods, Brett just mentioned, covered forms of mobility. I think in 10 years from now, we will also see air taxis, and would be super happy to have them integrated on our platform. That goes without saying. But I think we can expect a lot in terms of vehicles They're just starting to experiment, and all the suppliers will find new sustainable ways. And yes, I think that will also sync with society. I think it will be a slow progression, but we will go there and get. Yeah.
Does FreeNow intend to get into air taxis?
I mean, we are a platform, so we're not going to get into any form of vehicles, but we're happily integrating all of them. So I would be super proud if we were the first platform having air taxis on our platform, yes.
Roger, you like air taxis?
Oh, it's a fantastic idea, yeah. I
Do
think,
you think it's going to catch on? To me, one of the biggest issues with it is having enough space, because the air taxis I've seen are huge. So I'm not sure where we're going to park them all. That's the only issue I have. Otherwise, I think it would work.
I think it will catch on in major kind of lucrative routes between inner cities and transport hubs like airports. So I think it'll happen along with autonomous vehicles. I think we'll see, certainly by the end of the decade, significant commercialization of autonomous vehicle projects as well. In terms of your question, where will I be? I mean, I think I'll be in the middle of a digitized electricity system where, you know, your car will be just part of a sort of smart charging or smart device where we'll be taking the load and be able to use it in a smart way to enable more renewables into
I have to stop you there, Roger, because we're just about out of time. Brad, 2 seconds. Air taxis, yes. So we're going to see them or no?
Yes.
Okay.
I look forward to it.
All right. My guests have been Brad Bao of Lime, Silvia Fischer of FreeNow, Roger Hunter of Shell, and Karen Vancluysen of POLIS. And thank you very much for joining us today. I think it was a lively discussion. We got into a lot of issues involving urban mobility and what the future of it is. And thank you so much for your time.